Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Field Sales Leadership Guide podcast. But really, when we don't have a guest on, it's just JT and I talking and rambling and maybe having a cup of coffee in the morning with our Friday conversations.
Pontificating.
Yes, pontificating. Excellent verb, JT. So today we will pontificate on how an outside sales org should make sure their outside sales team's KPIs should match their go-to-market motion. Now, we're throwing a lot of things at you in just that sentence alone. So you have KPIs, those are key performance indicators, or how you are measuring or not measuring your sales reps, which we'll get to in a second. And then the go-to-market motion, that is a term that's thrown around pretty loosely if you are in the LinkedIn world. But what this really means is just how you build relationships with your customers. So how you go out, acquire customers, and retain those customers. So that's all we're saying. We're saying, hey, you should be measuring your outside sales team based on how you interact with and build customers and retain those customers. So your sales team has KPIs, whether you track them or not. And what this means is they're optimizing their day around those KPIs. So for a company who maybe their KPI is just sales quota, like, hey, all you have to do is hit your quota month over month, quarter over quarter. Like, just make sure you hit your quota. So what would an outside sales rep optimize for? Hitting the quota, right? And that's likely revenue. And it's likely going to come from a place where the sales rep is guaranteed to get that revenue. So what we see a lot of times when it's just sales quota as the overarching KPI for the outside sales rep, they're just going to keep going back to the same the same people who continue to give them guaranteed orders, guaranteed invoices. So for companies who don't do this, they're either doing some combination of hitting whatever quota you give them in the easiest, most predictable way possible. Or if they don't even have a quota, they don't have any KPIs whatsoever, they're doing as much or as little as possible to stay under the radar. So this is not to disparage the outside sales rep. This is a wake-up call for anyone in any job, because everyone, me, marketing, I'm measured on a KPI, whether it's documented or not. And that's how I'm prioritizing my day. So what we want to kind of dig into today is, if you don't have KPIs for your outside sales team, we're going to show you some use cases or talk through them, how other companies started and continue to measure outside sales rep KPIs. And if you already do measure your outside sales team on some combination of KPIs, maybe this is just a good brainstorm session if you're looking to optimize those KPIs. So, JT, before we dive in, anything to add to our intro?
Yeah, I would add that what's been surprising to me in my almost 3 years with my customers, doing a lot of ride-alongs, speaking with a lot of outside sales leaders from CROs, VPs, directors, managers, the vast majority of outside sales-driven organizations, they don't have KPIs other than revenue. So that's their main KPI. And the funny thing is I'll get into these conversations, and largely they'll look at me and go, "What other KPI do you need?" It's just revenue. And ultimately, they don't use terms like leading indicators. They focus on revenue, and it ends up being backward facing, not proactive, and you don't have any insight as to what the leading indicators or KPIs are that actually drive the revenue. So that's what we're talking about when we talk KPIs, what gets us to revenue, so that you actually have a reliable means of predictability, accurate forecasting versus just my 35 years in this seat tells me it's going to be 12, and just going by your gut gray matter in your brain. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking KPIs.
Yeah, I love that. Can you just dive just a little bit more into that backward facing? Because I love that term. And I know you've talked about it before, but just what that means, like a good example of it.
So look, I've had this conversation enough times where I'm starting to develop the nervous tick. I'll have fantastic functional fits where it just makes so much sense for a company to come on board with Map My Customers, and it's a good looking partnership, and we'll get all the way to the CRO level. And the CRO has been in that seat for 20 plus years. They're very late stage in their own career. They've been with the same company for 35 to 40 years. And they sit there and they go, I know exactly how my team performs. I get the numbers on September 15th with how we performed in August. And there's no like communication channel of like, well, if we were having a bad August, we don't know how to stop it from being a bad August until September 15th when the numbers actually come out. And I'm not the world's brightest bulb in the room, but I will say it's impossible to impact August numbers when it's already September. So that's backward facing. The math just doesn't
Excellent. Love it. Okay, so we're going to dive into some use cases. We are going to start with one of our favorite examples who we talk about all the time on the Field Sales Leadership Guide podcast, and that is Joe McDonald of Jasper Engines and Transmissions. Take it away, JT.
Yeah, look, it's no secret we love Joe McDonald. He's not only as a normal human being, he's an awesome person, but he's a great sales leader. To set the table, Jasper Engines and Transmissions have got 160 OSRs, outside sales reps, a lot of fantastic, great regional managers as well on the team. And to date, Joe has the best built out sales processes within Jasper of really any outside sales rep that we've outside sales company that we've worked with. So what I want to chat about through this example is, Mary, you actually love this term, is the revenue team that Jasper has created. So when I say revenue team, historically you've got marketing in a very definitive silo, and you've got sales in a very definitive silo, and then they kind of fight over the scrappings of who gets credit for what. That's not the case at Jasper. So one of the key KPIs that they go after is tracking what assets, and I'll define that in a moment, are shared with decision makers when a rep is on site at an auto shop. So what I mean by that, an asset, marketing, part of the revenue team, develops a great product video, 35 seconds to 2 minutes. It could be a one-pager or a spec sheet or a product sheet where JT, the outside sales rep, is showing Ben, the shop owner, very specific things on my tablet. When I show that specific asset to Ben, the shop owner, there's metrics being logged of how long did I show this to Ben, what assets were shown, did I email that to Ben afterwards, and then did Ben share that with anybody else within the organization? How many times did Ben view that video or asset as the shop owner? And this gives them unbelievable insight as to this video actually leads to revenue. And they can look in specific regions, whether there's specific assets that work better in the Southeast versus the Northwest versus the Northeast. And Joe and all of his sales leaders hold the reps accountable to showing some sort of presentation to each shop owner that they see each day. Now, I have to give massive credit to a specific company. Jasper uses Big Tin Can. You would most likely see that heavily involved in med device and med diagnostic sales. But Joe's at the forefront of really educating in a very meaningful, simplistic way, leveraging Big Tin Can for the data, for the assets to all be relevant, where a rep doesn't have to walk in and go, oh, I know we have a product video on that specific transmission. I don't know where it is. It's all there for them because of Big Tin Can. Look up Big Tin Can. They're a fantastic company to work with. And they provide tons of value there. Ultimately, the goal of all of these KPIs that they're tracking with these assets, Joe can with certainty know JT, the outside sales rep, is showing the right assets to the right people within these shops, and know that I'm controlling what I can control. And that ultimately leads to revenue.
Yeah, that's fantastic, JT. What I love the most, and I think is super interesting, especially from a marketing perspective, is that's just like one thing that Jasper tracks. And we'll talk a little bit more about Jasper later in this episode. But imagine having access to, their reps are held to 12 to 13 good calls per day across 160 reps, and you're getting all of that data on which videos they're being seen, which presentations, which PDFs. That's crazy good data. Like the marketing team, like you said, the entire revenue team can start optimizing just that one piece of the buyer's journey, which is so cool.
It really is. And one of Joe's phrases that we love to steal and leverage is measure what matters. And so anytime Joe and the Jasper team deploy something new, they'll start with a small core group of early adopters and make sure that measuring that specific initiative matters. And one of the things that Joe is really great at doing is equipping the reps as to why they're going to track something. And you want to talk about buy-in. Like, you get buy-in whenever a rep understands the value as to, if I do this, it provides the company this, and ultimately me this. And it closes that loop as to why the data is being captured in the first place, which ultimately drives adoption, which ultimately drives the KPI and the information and the predictability that Joe's after in the first place.
Love it. That was a great example. Okay, so dove into a little bit on the automotive aftermarket. We're going to shift to machinery distribution. You guys heard a little bit from him in a past episode. That's Joe Anderson, Director of Field Sales at Royal Brass and Hose. And his KPI, which he mentioned during his episode, is funnel audits. So their reps are measured on where certain deals lie in their sales funnel. So when they're meeting one-on-one with either Joe or their regional manager, all they're talking about is where certain deals lie in the funnel. And that's how a rep is prioritizing their day, week, month, quarter. So making sure not only are you seeing those deals at the bottom of the funnel, so making sure, do they have the order? Did you follow up on the order? What else do they need to get a signature? They're also looking at the middle of that funnel. So do we need to get more key stakeholders involved if it's in the middle of the funnel? And then, of course, at the top of the funnel, are we making sure there's a healthy enough amount of top funnel leads to keep that funnel moving forward? So I just love that as a very simplistic way of saying, here is what we need to be tracking. Here's what we found measuring what matters. Here's what's important to our sales process. And that is what the outside sales team is measured on and optimizes for week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter. So I just love that example. It's such a great one. And Joe Anderson was a fantastic interviewee. So anything to add, JT?
Yeah, one, yes, Joe is awesome. Two, take a lesson from Joe in that, bottom line, he takes great passion in strategically helping reps in specific deals. So one of the key reasons that he tracks these things within specific stages of a sales cycle is that it equips him to coach the reps and to guide them along the way. Look, a lot of our listeners, you guys are at the very beginning of these data-driven KPI initiatives. And my guess is that you're doing the traditional, well, I speak with my guys every day, so I know what deal they're working. Well, hopefully they're working multiple deals, and most likely you have multiple reps on your team. So the efficiency of being able to quickly, at a glance, strategically poke holes in a deal to head off the driving off of a cliff, or avoid objections before they come up. You can coach your team strategically because you have that data.
Yeah, I love that one. And we, of course, love Joe Anderson.
Yes, we do.
Moving on. So we have talked automotive aftermarket. We have talked machinery distribution. Now we're going to move into the flooring manufacturing and distribution space. So this is a really interesting one. I don't want to use the word stodgy, but maybe a little bit stuck in their ways as far as this industry goes. But what we're finding are some very unique KPIs within this particular niche industry. So, JT, talk us through it.
Yeah. So, one, we're gaining much momentum within the flooring industry. But for those of you that don't know the Map My Customers story, that's how Map My Customers was started. Matt Sniff, our founder, his father was an outside rep for a flooring company for his whole career. And Matt was very startled when he realized, how has my dad been providing for the family this many years like this with notebooks and Post-it notes? So that's how Map My Customers came into existence. The example that I want to share, actually, before I do that, I want to reiterate, if you're not familiar with flooring, it is the absolute epitome of the go-to-market strategy of relationships matter. Like being present, being consistent, earning trust in person is how the flooring industry moves forward. So that said, Mary already alluded to it. It's a very antiquated 1970s, 1980s technology absent industry where it's gray matter in the head for reps that have been in the same territory patch for 35 years. And so there's a couple of key players, Broadloom being one of them, that is really changing the flooring industry for the better with regards to the efficiencies that technology can drive. So that commercial aside, I will now say what we see, tracking where samples have been dropped off. So JT, the outside sales rep in North Carolina, I have laminate and hardwood, and I drop off samples at Keo Flooring. I've been writing it on my notebook, maybe a Post-it note, or maybe just in my head going, yeah, I'll come back there. And there was no ability to say, this type of flooring, hardwood, is doing very, very well in the Raleigh market. Maybe we should drop more hardwood samples at all of our other retail locations in the Raleigh market to therefore equate samples to revenue. The funny thing is like that's where I go. ROI of dropping off a sample. That's where I go. A lot of these flooring companies go, we're wasting thousands of dollars in samples because we're dropping them off and we have no clue where they go. Or we've created these really elaborate point of purchase displays or product displays. We've put them in a store. We don't remember what store we dropped it off. And it could be years until we find that out. And we've not been able to track any of those marketing product awareness efforts to revenue.
Yeah, love it. That was perfect. So this is a very interesting one. So speaking in the same vein of where are samples being dropped off, is that equating to increases in revenue? This other company we're going to talk about is in the construction supply space, and they do a very interesting go-to-market where if they find that a certain type of construction supply, so some lumber, it could be hammers, nails, whatever in the construction industry is driving revenue in certain areas, they have these heat maps. So the way that they use Map My Customers is the rep goes to a location, they mark which type of construction supply that they're dropping off or that the customer is buying. And the way that they go to market is if they find these heat patches getting bigger and bigger, so there's lots of lumber being delivered to Greensboro, North Carolina, they want to open a physical location there. So they want to make sure they're continuously supplying the Greensboro area with certain types of construction supplies. So I just really love that example. And this was actually driven by marketing. So marketing is largely responsible for market research, so determining how and where this company should be focusing their time, effort, and money. And this is the way that they accomplished it, was making sure we are supplying the correct areas in a specific region with a physical location for construction supplies. So I just love that example. It's really cool.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Let me this is not our last one. I'm gonna go into one here. It's in the car dealership space. I can't give a ton of very big specifics on this for a couple of key reasons, but the moral of this story and of this example is you've got to have a reason for the KPI that you're tracking. So the wrong KPI produces the wrong result. So in this particular example, there was a very set assigned account base of approximately 80 accounts per rep. And this was actually in the North Carolina area as well. And this particular account rep, very faithful with face-to-face engagement, educating the market, building trust, consistently going into each dealership that she was assigned to, because the KPI that was tracked was she was held accountable to visiting all 80 one time a month. So she was faithfully doing that. The sad part about this is that account base, that account patch that she was in, they're not her ideal customer profile. This particular customer or company has a very specific price point of cars that alludes to their ideal customer profile. And so, I'm trying not to say names here. She was wasting her time. If you want to produce or have the outcome of low morale, where a rep knows that it's just the sales administrative tax that they have to pay to be employed at your company, make them do activities that don't lead to revenue. Making them go into a prospect that will never become a customer is a waste of time. And most importantly, it's a morale killer, and it's a waste of expenses. You've got car wear and tear, you've got gas, and the opportunity cost of where she should be to an ideal customer profile when they're never going to buy. So track what matters. And maybe most importantly for this summary, know what matters.
Yeah, it's like a perfect example of you are obviously going to optimize for the KPIs you're measured against. And unfortunately, the KPIs for her were just visits to specific accounts.
I should have thought of this long before, but Joe McDonald's still in my head. Part of his measure what matters is what gets measured gets done.
Yep.
And if you're going to hold a rep's feet to the fire to go and visit a company that will not become a customer, A, I hope the rep pushes back. B, I hope you look at them with some level of loyalty because they continue to do that, but also a healthy level of skepticism if they're not complaining about it. But it's your job as the sales leader to uncover those and provide ways for them to disqualify or move out. Maybe you don't see that customer once a month. Maybe she sees them once a quarter or once every 6 months to see if market conditions change. But stop making somebody do something that will not lead to revenue.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, so we're going to wrap up our use cases with one of my personal favorites, because Luke Wittenbrocker is a very good friend of mine. He works over at MacTech Industries. They sell big old pieces of equipment. Go look them up if you don't recognize the name. But their KPIs are only opportunities. So they have about 11 reps on their outside sales team. And as a team, they are responsible for bringing in a certain number of opportunities week over week. So nothing else matters. It doesn't matter who it's coming from. It doesn't matter what region it's in. It doesn't matter what type of opportunity it is or the opportunity value. They just need to bring in a certain number of opportunities per week. And that's what the entire team is measured on. Now, during the episode where Luke was here, of course, we challenged him a little bit on maybe starting to measure some leading indicators, but he fully admitted that, hey, I'm kind of new in this role, and I had to reintroduce a CRM that no rep wanted in place in their tech stack. So I just have to kind of follow where my team is at for the moment it's at. And I think that just takes us into our next point really, really well. So another thing that JT and I talk about all the time is whenever you're doing a new initiative, bringing on a new tech stack, starting a new sales process, optimizing your KPIs, make sure you're doing a crawl, walk, run approach. Otherwise, you are just going to frustrate the heck out of your outside sales team. So this example from Luke from MacTech, which he fully admitted, is a really great example of the crawl stage. Hey, we have a new CRM. I want my reps to just use the CRM, and I want to, as Joe says, measure what matters at the stage we're at. So at the stage they're at in this crawl stage, all that matters is that they're logging opportunities and they're hitting their number of opportunities week over week.
Yeah, that's perfect. Like that is what matters. And what's the saying we always say? Do not let perfection get in the way of progress.
Yes.
So get them moving forward, and that gets the rep bought into, this data helps, and it's actually easier. And then all of a sudden, everybody's pushing the boat in the same direction.
Yep, exactly. So I think what we can also do here, JT, is use the use cases we talked about today to say, hey, what does crawl, walk, run look like when we're starting to measure these KPIs? So we just talked about MacTech, really great example of a crawl approach. Walk approach, I think that Joe Anderson from Royal Brass and Hose is an excellent example of the walk phase. So they already have number of opportunities or number of deals that they have in the pipeline, but now they've said, okay, I want a certain number of deals to be at specific stages in that pipeline. And now we're optimizing our one-on-ones and the reps priority week over week, month over month, based on where deals are in those stages. So they're filling the top of the funnel while also prioritizing deals that are moving toward the bottom of the funnel. So I think that's just a really great example of the walk approach for measuring what matters.
It is. And I'll give one more shout out to Joe McDonald at Jasper for the run phase. The only reason that Joe and the entire Jasper team can run is because they went through crawl and walk. And each time they introduce another data set or scrap one data set as maybe it no longer applies and they introduce a new one, is because they'll go back to crawl in that stage. Like there's no shame in going crawl, walk, run, crawl, walk, run, crawl, walk, run as you introduce new KPIs. But the key element that the Jasper team would acknowledge is that anytime there's a new initiative, it's always communicated the why, and the reps understand the value of why that particular data set or KPI is being tracked in the first place. So there's buy-in. And then just as important is it's got to be easy for a rep to actually log that data. And we would always tell you, for an outside sales rep, that needs to be mobile first. If you can equip a rep to not have any admin work to do when they pull in the driveway at the end of a long day, you're winning because you've gotten the data. Morale's high from the rep because they don't have any other email reports to fire off or any spreadsheets to fill out or opening up their laptop because it's already done on their mobile device. So that's what makes successful tracking of KPIs.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's bring it home. Let's wrap this baby up. So just because you're not tracking any KPIs now doesn't mean you don't have a good place to start. So Luke from MacTech, new sales director, wants to bring on a CRM because he understands what's important. And he started from zero. He was like, I don't know, I have the CRM. I have my team of reps. Like, now what? So his first initiative was to go on ride-alongs with his reps, understand how deals moved through deal stages in the company, even though those weren't well defined. Like, why does a customer input an order? How does the order move to processed? How does the invoice come in? So even just starting to track how deals move and then how salespeople get those deals is an excellent place to start. So just because you're not tracking anything now doesn't mean you can't start.
I love that. Bottom line, you're looking at revenue and then reverse engineering. How did we get to revenue? And if you can't articulate that now, you've got to start that journey immediately. So I would I would definitely encourage you to do that. And then this is a very direct encouragement for outside sales leaders. I come from Salesforce. I know the CRM space very well. Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, Pega, even HubSpot. And HubSpot's very easy to use. None of those, the world's largest CRMs, were ever designed for outside sales reps. They were all designed for what our go-to-market is. We're behind a laptop. We're having Zoom meetings, and we can stand after a meeting and type notes until our heart is content to track all of that data. We don't have to worry about getting back in the car and getting to our next appointment, or trying to reverse fill our day if an appointment cancels on us. Your reps do. So it's got to be mobile first and unbelievably user friendly for them to get that data in and for you to make an impact to revenue.
Yeah, I love that. My background is I worked in the industrial and manufacturing space for 8 years before I came to map my customers, and I can't tell you how many times I saw it. Like, leaders were really excited to see dashboards, to see reports, but there's not a lot of data to show because the outside reps aren't using the CRM.
Okay, this is a platform that I get all juiced up on. I love that you just said that. It cracks me up that you have organizations that have been maybe family owned for 80 years. They operate from this and maybe spreadsheets. And then all of a sudden they're like, data, we should use data. And then they go to some of the world's largest CRMs, and then they're caught dumbfounded whenever the sales reps don't adopt it. And guess what they don't get whenever there's no adoption? Data. So the very pretty dashboards and reporting that they thought they were going to be able to present to their CEO and their CFO are all blank. And they had this huge investment into a sales force, and they're like, yeah, we need something else. So start with the rep in mind, know what you need to track, and look at it from the rep's perspective as to how to track that.
Couldn't have ended it any better myself, JT. That was perfect.
Rant over.
Yes, awesome. Steps off soapbox. All right, so thank you guys all for listening all the way through this episode. We love that you listen. We love that you continue to listen. Please reach out to JT or me on LinkedIn if you have any ideas, or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast. We'd love to have you on. So thank you again for listening to the Field Sales Leadership Guide podcast. And JT, thank you again for joining another excellent coffee conversation.
Thanks a bunch, and happy late birthday to Mary Keogh.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.